Who could ever forget the sudden and untimely death of Hollywood actress Natalie Wood? The starlet's body was found floating in the Pacific Ocean.
I've always been terrified, still am, of water, dark water, seawater.
The Natalie Wood mystery has haunted Hollywood for over 4 decades. A beloved actress, a calm night on a yacht, and then she was gone. Officially ruled an accident, her death was wrapped in silence, conflicting stories, and unexplained bruises. But new revelations, hidden testimonies, and a long-suppressed investigation are now bringing disturbing truths to light.
She slipped and hit the step and then rolled in. That's what we think happened.
And if what's emerging is real, then the Natalie Wood mystery is finally solved, and it isn't good. Why did authorities stay quiet? Who was protecting whom? And what secrets have been hiding just beneath the surface all these years? The answers are more chilling than expected. A Hollywood fairy tale that fell apart. Natalie Wood wasn't just part of Hollywood, she was Hollywood. Her life had all the markings of a studio-crafted dream. The child star who grew up on screen, the beautiful ingenue who made the transition to serious roles, the woman who earned the admiration of critics, the adoration of audiences, and the kind of fame that made her a household name before she was old enough to vote. From the moment she appeared in Miracle on 34th Street, it was clear Natalie wasn't like other kids in showbiz. She carried emotion in her eyes. She knew how to hold silence. She knew how to make you feel something without saying a word. By the time she starred in Rebel Without a Cause opposite James Dean, she had already built a career most actors could only dream of. But that film made her a symbol, a voice for misunderstood youth. A rare actress who brought real-life pain to the screen and didn't try to cover it up. Hollywood noticed. She earned an Oscar nomination at just 17, and more roles followed, each one adding something new to her story. Splendor in the Grass, West Side Story, Love with the Proper Stranger. Even when the scripts were uneven, Natalie's presence never was. Off-screen, her life was just as closely watched, especially her relationship with actor Robert Wagner. When they married in 1957, it was a media frenzy. They were young, beautiful, successful, and deeply in love, or at least that's how it looked on the covers of magazines. Their marriage didn't last long the first time around, ending in divorce after 5 years. But somehow, years later, they found their way back to each other. By 1972, they were remarried, living in Los Angeles with their children, surrounded by the kind of wealth and fame most people only fantasize about. Still, even in her happiest moments, Natalie carried a sense of fragility. Friends and family would later say she was someone who lived with an undercurrent of anxiety, someone who worried, someone who doubted, someone who never felt entirely safe. She had a deep fear of water, something she often mentioned in interviews. A childhood trauma, she said. Something she couldn't quite explain but never shrugged off. For most of her life, she avoided boats altogether. Even as her career slowed in the late 1970s, Natalie remained a beloved figure in the industry. She was gearing up for a kind of second act, an adult career that could take her from actress to producer, from on-screen icon to behind-the-scenes force. In 1981, she had just finished working on the sci-fi film Brainstorm opposite Christopher Walken. The shoot had been difficult, but Natalie was excited. There were new roles on the horizon, new stories to tell. She was 43, still radiant, still ambitious, and still somehow at the center of Hollywood's attention. Then came the trip to Catalina Island. What was meant to be a short weekend getaway turned into something far more sinister. Natalie, Robert Wagner, Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain, Dennis Davern, set out on a quiet cruise aboard Splendor. It was Thanksgiving weekend. The sea was calm. The mood, at least from the outside, seemed light. But by the time the sun rose on November 29, only 3 of them were left. Natalie was gone. The news hit like a shockwave. A star, one of the stars, dead in the water. Drowned, they said. An accident, they called it. But behind the polished headlines and formal statements, something felt off. The details didn't line up. The people involved weren't saying much, and the more time passed, the more questions began to rise. Quiet ones at first, then louder, then impossible to ignore. What really happened that night on the Splendor? How did a woman terrified of water end up floating alone in the sea? And why, even after all these years, has no one been able or willing to give a straight answer? To understand how that fairy tale ended, we have to go back to the final night, when everything Natalie feared seemed to find her in the dark. The final hours. On the surface, it seemed like a quiet night off the coast of Catalina Island. The yacht Splendor rocked gently in the dark water, anchored near Blue Cavern Point. On board were 4 people: Natalie Wood, her husband Robert Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain Dennis DeVerne. They had spent the day drinking, dining in Avalon, and returning to the boat for what should have been a relaxed nightcap. But underneath that calm, something was building, a tension no one wanted to name, and a silence that would later feel far too calculated. Just after midnight on November 29, 1981, something happened. What exactly, no one has ever agreed on. According to Wagner's early statements, Natalie had gone to bed, and when he eventually joined her, she wasn't there. The dinghy was gone too. But DeVerne, the captain, would eventually tell a different story, a much darker one.
Does that evidence lead you to believe that whatever happened to Natalie Wood was not an accident?
Well, it does. It actually confirms my suspicions even more that what was originally reported isn't exactly what happened.
At 1:30 a.m., a call for help went out. By sunrise, Natalie's body had been found floating face down in the chilly water not far from the shoreline. She was dressed in a nightgown, socks, and a red down jacket. The small rubber dinghy was discovered nearby, its engine off, its oars floating loose. What stood out wasn't just how Natalie had died, but how quickly everyone seemed to settle on the idea that she had simply fallen overboard. The initial report from the coroner's office was just that, an accident. A woman, slightly drunk, attempting to secure the dinghy, perhaps slipping in the dark. There was no mention of struggle, no signs of foul play noted. It all seemed tragic but simple. And yet not long after, quiet doubt started forming. Why would a woman terrified of deep water, the kind of fear Natalie had spoken about openly, try to handle a dinghy alone at night in pitch black waters? Why didn't the dinghy's engine show signs of use? And why weren't the bruises on her body mentioned in more detail? It would take more than 30 years before those questions forced a second look. In 2012, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office made a striking change. Natalie's cause of death was amended to drowning and other undetermined factors. That wasn't just bureaucratic language. It was an admission that something about her death didn't add up. The updated report revealed what many had suspected for years. Natalie's body was covered in bruises. Some were fresh. There were marks on her arms, legs, and face, bruising on the forearm, abrasions to her forehead, a scratch on her neck, and injuries to her knee and wrist. Forensic specialists noted that the pattern and distribution of those injuries weren't consistent with a simple fall into the water. Some appeared to be caused by blunt force, others possibly defensive. And almost all of them, according to the report, likely occurred before she entered the ocean. Michael Franco, a detective involved in the reopened case, later told 48 Hours that it looked more like she had been pushed than that she had slipped. One pathologist went even further, suggesting that the injuries looked like those of someone who had been in a physical altercation, not someone trying to climb into a boat. These weren't the kinds of wounds you'd expect from a tipsy misstep or a rope entanglement. They told a different story, one that suggested chaos before silence, one that no longer fit the idea of a quiet accident. And then there's the matter of time. If Natalie was noticed missing around midnight, why wasn't a search launched immediately? DeVerne later admitted that Wagner stopped him from turning on the boat's searchlights or calling for help right away. That delay, intentional or not, only deepened suspicion. What happened on that deck between the last drink and the moment Natalie vanished remains unclear. But what her body revealed in the aftermath speaks louder than anyone aboard ever has. It showed fear, force, struggle, and perhaps an attempt to erase all of it with the calmest lie a person can tell, that nothing happened at all. But the bruises told a story the headlines refused to, and that silence in the aftermath, well, that's where things get even darker. Bruises, power, and the silence that followed. When Natalie Wood's body was pulled from the cold waters near Catalina Island, the headlines had already decided the cause of death by the morning, a tragic accident. The official story was that she had tried to secure the dinghy and slipped. But that version of events never truly matched the facts, and it certainly didn't match the bruises on her body. What unfolded the night before has been pieced together from clashing testimonies, rewritten memories, and years of delay. Natalie, Robert Wagner, Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain Dennis Davern had been drinking heavily during a Thanksgiving weekend getaway. Tensions had been rising between Wagner and Walken, who were reportedly clashing over Natalie's career. According to Davern, the argument on board escalated after they returned from dinner. Wagner, jealous of how close Walken and Natalie had grown on the set of Brainstorm, reportedly broke a wine bottle and shouted, "Are you sleeping with my wife?" That wasn't just a passing outburst. Davern later claimed he heard yelling, things being thrown, and finally, a deafening silence. When Natalie disappeared, Wagner waited nearly 2 hours before calling for help. Davern wanted to turn on the searchlights. Wagner told him not to. He wanted to radio the Coast Guard. Wagner said no. That delay would later come under heavy scrutiny. Why wait? And more importantly, what exactly happened before she vanished? In the years that followed, most of those questions were buried. The LAPD accepted Wagner's version without pressure. Davern, who admitted to lying during the original investigation, wasn't aggressively questioned. No one pushed Walken for answers. The case was closed quickly, quietly. It felt like everyone involved wanted it that way. Hollywood had always protected its own. In the early 80s, Robert Wagner wasn't just a famous actor, he was beloved. Natalie, for all her stardom, had always carried her own quiet vulnerabilities. She had a fear of dark water, one she never got over even as an adult. Lana Wood, Natalie's sister, later said Natalie wouldn't have gone near that dinghy alone, especially in the dark. So why did the official story assume she did? The deeper issue wasn't just what happened that night, but how quickly the machinery around her turned off the spotlight. The LAPD didn't push. The media, still in awe of Wagner's clean-cut image, softened the narrative. Even Davern stayed quiet for years, afraid to go against the man who signed his paychecks. It wasn't until he published a tell-all book and sat down with NBC in 2011 that the cracks began to show. And by then, the evidence had faded. The statements had changed. The damage had been done. Natalie Wood's death wasn't just a Hollywood tragedy. It became a blueprint for how power, silence, and public image can cloud the search for truth. The bruises on her body may have faded in the morgue, but the marks left on the investigation still remain. Now, while the world moved on, Natalie's sister never did, and she wasn't about to let the truth stay buried. Lana Wood's fight for justice. For years, Lana Wood stayed quiet. She smiled through interviews, answered questions carefully, and tried to preserve her sister Natalie's legacy without stirring up more pain. But deep down, she never bought the official story. And in 2021, she finally said enough was enough.
Oh, she'd be devastated. She would be devastated.
What would she do?
She'd fix it.
Lana released a book called Little Sister, and it didn't hold back. She didn't just tell stories from their childhood or share memories from movie sets. She launched her own investigation, and what she uncovered left no room for fairy tales. Lana believes Natalie didn't just fall into the water. She believes something went very wrong that night on the Splendor and that someone knows exactly what it was. In the book, Lana has questioned everything: the timeline, the injuries, the silence from the other people on that boat. She's asked why Wagner never gave a full interview under oath, why the bruises on Natalie's body weren't taken more seriously, and why so many key witnesses weren't even interviewed when it mattered most. She's gone through police reports, autopsy files, press coverage, and old audio tapes, looking for the truth no one else seemed willing to say out loud.
Stand up and tell me the truth. I know things go bad. I know people lose their tempers. I know bad things happen when you don't want them to. So stand up and tell me that. Tell me what happened to her.
What makes her voice so powerful isn't just the evidence, it's that she knew Natalie better than anyone. And when she says her sister was afraid, when she says something felt off about that night, it hits different. She's not speculating, she's grieving, and she's been doing it in a world that keeps choosing silence. Lana doesn't think there's going to be a big confession. She knows the chances of getting real answers now are slim, but she refuses to let Natalie's story end with a question mark. She wants people to see through the polished headlines and charming TV interviews. to recognize that the bruises weren't just physical. The damage ran deeper. And maybe, even after all these years, telling the truth, piece by painful piece, is the only justice left. Natalie Wood's story still echoes with unanswered questions and uneasy silence. Was it truly an accident or a truth too dangerous to tell? If this mystery shook you, share your thoughts below. Do you believe justice was ever served? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more deep dives into Hollywood's most haunting untold stories.